Before this video begins, I'd like to give a huge thanks to my channel members who you can see on screen now. Become a member by hitting the join button and get your name here among other awards today. Hello there and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we are taking a look at some more of the classic muscle cars. Let's begin with the 1970 Dodge Coronet Super B, 425 horsepower, 490 foot-pound torque, 3,420 pounds of weight. This is the torquiest car here today. It is also probably the largest car here today, or it's certainly one of the largest, and perhaps the ugliest car here today. I'm not a huge fan of the way the Super B looks. I know it's an acquired taste. Some people really like the Super B styling, but personally I prefer the standard Coronet, which is more just sort of straight box instead of this sort of weird curved, weird front grille thing that's going on with this car. Anyways, the Coronet, let's speak muscle cars quickly. In general, you're going to hear a lot of terms thrown around here. All muscle cars drive relatively similar. They all are quite floaty, they all like to understeer. Some of them like to oversteer, or for the most part, most of them like to oversteer if you give them half a chance, but it's kind of hard when you're dealing with so much understeer. They drive relatively heavy, and the gearboxes aren't good enough because they're usually 3 or 4 speed gearboxes. In the case of this Coronet, well, on paper it's certainly impressive. It's actually relatively light for a proper big muscle car, and also has a lot of power, which means it is actually quite quick. It could probably embarrass a modern sports car if given half a chance. Other than that though, it's alright. I mean, it doesn't drive any notably worse than some other muscle cars of this era. There are better driving ones. Dodge Charger comes to mind. I believe the Charger's a good handling muscle car anyway. It's been a while since I drove it. But yeah, overall, the Coronet, not a bad car in general. Next up, the 1970 Chevrolet Camaro Z28, 360 horsepower, 380 foot-pound torque, 3,550 pounds of weight. That's interesting. Now, the Camaro is actually one of the smaller cars we have here today. In fact, it's a pony car, but I've decided to just put pony and muscle cars into the same episode for this purpose because there's not enough pony cars left, and I can't really be bothered to ask Scotian again to delineate which one's a pony and which one's a muscle. Anyways, the Camaro, 3,550 pounds of weight, is a lot for a car this small. In fact, it's the second heaviest car here today, despite being perhaps the smallest, which I find odd. This is the second generation of Camaro. It all started to go slightly wrong towards the end of this Camaro's lifespan, but as far as this one goes, it certainly was not a bad car. It was still when muscle cars were strong and emissions weren't killing them yet. As far as it goes to drive though, I've got to be honest, it's not as expected. I was expecting this to be a little bit sharper. The Camaros usually are slightly more sporty cars than their bigger muscle equivalents, but no, this Camaro drives very floaty. Not a huge fan of this one, got to be really honest. I would probably pick the first gen Camaro over this, at least from a handling perspective. Styling wise, I don't really care for either. I'm not a Camaro person, don't know if you can tell, but yeah, overall just not as nice as I was expecting it to be, which is a bit of a shame. Yeah, just not really as good a car as you'd think. Next up, 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 302, the Camaro's rival, 290 horsepower, 290 foot-pound torque, 3,250 pounds of weight. This is the least torquey car here today, and in general, power and torque figures are down quite considerably on this one. It's the second least powerful car here today, only being saved by something coming later. Yeah, the Mustang's figures are not all that impressive, which I can't say I was really expecting. Weight's not bad though, it's 300 pounds less than the Camaro, but then again it's, you know, 70 horsepower down, so perhaps that's not so good. As far as it goes to drive, well, unsurprisingly from the Mustang, from the Boss 302, and from looking at the figures, the actual handling on this is pretty darn good for a muscle car. It's about on par as what you'd get from most sort of 60s, 70s sports cars. They weren't particularly good, sharp precision machines themselves, so this car certainly fits right in with that crowd. Although I will definitely say it's underpowered. This thing could so do with an extra 60, 70 horsepower. It would probably be pretty darn spot on with that, but as far as it drives today, it's just underpowered. You saw it getting launch off the line. It just does not gallop off the line like most muscle cars do. It sort of just sits there and contemplates life for a little bit. Probably the slowest car in a straight line here today, except for one. So yeah, slight disappointment, but not too bad overall. Next up, we have the 1969 Pontiac GTO Judge, 365 horsepower, 445 foot-pound torque, 3,623 pounds of weight. And this is the heaviest car here today, and again, much like the Coronet, it is a proper big muscle car. The GTO was the first ever proper muscle car, I guess you could say, and the Judge is sort of an evolution of that, the top spec one back in '69. While the GTO isn't really talked about that much in relation to muscle cars later on, it's sort of only regarded as the first muscle car and then kind of dropped a little bit off. You don't really hear much about these later ones. The Judge is still pretty good. It starred in a film which I don't remember the name of, but it was quite a good comedy. Or it was a terrible comedy, I don't know. My taste in films is terrible. But nonetheless, the Judge, it looks cool. It's got a stripe. I like the stripe a lot. As far as it goes to drive, I'll be really honest, it's quite nondescript for a muscle car. It drives pretty much how you'd expect a muscle car to drive. It's a bit understeer, a bit floaty, likes to kick the rear end out if given half a chance, and the gearbox is a bit crap. Yeah, it's a muscle car, what do you expect? It drives like a muscle car, it is a muscle car. It does have the outside mounted tack, which is always an interesting feature where it's actually mounted on the bonnet. Can't quite remember why they did that. I assume it's so it could be in front of your eyes when you're drag racing, but weird little design quirk. Next up, the 1969 Chevrolet Nova 396, 375 horsepower, 415 foot-pound of torque, 3,470 pounds of weight. I quite like the Nova, in all honesty. I think it's quite a good looking car. I don't really know why, because it is literally a square with some circle headlights at the front and some square lights at the back. I don't know, maybe it's the fact it comes in silly colours, as all good muscle cars do, and also the colour is shared with the wheels, so I painted this one a ridiculous yellow. Yes, all of these are factory colours that you see, apart from one car which I think has a design on it. We'll get to that later. But yeah, no, everything you're seeing here today is on factory colours, and the factory colours are mental, and that's one of my favourite things about muscle cars. As far as this one goes to drive, well, unsurprisingly, I mean, look at it. It drives like a boat. It really is not a good driving car. Interestingly, it's lighter than the Camaro. I just noticed that by about 80 pounds. So, yeah, there's something fun for you. It's actually more powerful as well. But, yeah, overall, drives like a boat. Doesn't feel particularly fast, I've got to be honest. I mean, 375 horsepower is not a figure to shy away from. But compared to the Judge and the Coronet, it just doesn't feel all that fast, which is weird. Although we have seen cars in the past where they don't feel particularly quick actually turn in pretty good lap time, so it'll be interesting to see what this car turns up at the end of the episode. Next up, 1967 Ford Falcon GT, our Australian companion for today. 225 horsepower, 305 foot-pound torque, 3,150 pounds of weight. This is the least powerful car here today. See, it saved its fellow Ford companion, the Boss 302, and it is the lightest car here today, although not by much. It's only about 100 pounds lighter than the Boss, so yeah. Overall, still fairly light though for a car of this type. So the Ford Falcon then. This is sort of the stage where the Australian Falcon started to delineate from the American Mustang. They put bigger engines in it because they didn't get the Mustang. It had uprated suspension to deal with the harsh Australian outback, and a few other changes to make this Falcon into more of a unique vehicle. And then of course by 1970 the Americans would drop the Falcon and the Australians would keep producing it until 2016, I believe it was, when they finally killed off the Falcon. As far as this one goes to drive, well, I mean, it's actually unsurprising. Much like the last Ford we had, the Boss 302, it's pretty slow. It needs more power, but it's pretty good to drive. I mean, I can't really complain about it. Perhaps the better driving car here today, best handling overall, I guess, would be the term I'd use, although that's not saying much. I mean, look at how it takes that corner. Yeah, none of these cars are going to be handling machines, I've got to be honest, but, you know, the Falcon, to put it on some proper suspension, it might be able to do an autocross, I guess. And next up, we have the 1967 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray 427, 455 horsepower, 460 foot-pound torque, 3,384 pounds of weight, and this is the most powerful car here today by all of 10 horsepower over the equivalent Coronet, which had the heavy engine, I'd assume. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the C2, C3 Corvettes. I know that shocks a lot of people because people think these cars are absolutely beautiful and stunning. I really don't see it. I don't care if it's the split window or the later C3 or whatever. I just don't like these cars. I don't think they look good. And engineering-wise, they don't particularly appeal to my tastes. That being said, you know, this car on paper at least should be quick. In terms of sort of overall on-paper statistics, it is the quickest car here today. So, it feels fast. I will certainly give it that. After coming from the Falcon, this feels like a straight-line speed monster, and that's probably because it is. Again, modern muscle cars. Even if you put this thing against the C4 ZR1, this might even walk that. But overall handling's weird. It doesn't handle nearly as good as you'd expect. It's very boaty. There's a car I'm trying to think this drives like, and I can't remember the name of it off the tip of my tongue, but a really weird sports car is how I describe this car to drive. Not fun, not one that I particularly got along with, but there you go. And finally today, my personal favourite of today, the 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt. 425 horsepower, 480 foot-pound torque, 3,225 pounds of weight. It probably isn't a muscle car, I'll be honest. It's sort of a big family saloon car with a V8 and a bunch of drag racing modifications which were sold from factory. It's incredible. Yeah, it looks great, it looks mental. It's got that weird raised rear stance to make it better at drag racing. It's got some modifications inside. It's a mental car. It's huge amounts of fun to drive. It's incredibly fast, probably the quickest car overall in a straight line. It is lighter than the Corvette, and yeah, it's incredible. There is front end lift. It really likes to go on three wheels. You'll see a little bit of that in a minute. It's just mental fun. While it doesn't drive as good as, you know, something like the Corvette or even the Camaro or something like that, at least this car's predictable. You know it's going to try to kill you. You know the front end's going to come up on it. And you know it, there you go, front wheel in the air. It's incredible fun. I love this car. I love the Thunderbolt. A truly incredible car. If you want something fun to throw around a course, and actually something that's surprisingly quick, the Thunderbolt would be my recommendation, just because it is just so much hilarious fun to drive. And well, not only is it fun, it's also quick. It was the quickest car today, which shocks me immensely. 250th place, a 127.133. It's quicker than a Ferrari Daytona and a Buick Regal. The Fairlane is mental, and also apparently mentally quick as well. So yeah, that would definitely be my most recommended car today. Give that one a shot. In 260th place, unsurprisingly, the Chevrolet Corvette Stingray with a 127.449 goes in between a 190 Evolution and a Lincoln Continental, quicker than a Ford Sierra, Nissan 300ZX, Jaguar D-Type. I guess that's probably the most close car on that list to it. In 283rd place, we find the Dodge Coronet Super B with 128.649. Interestingly enough, just beaten out by a Neon SRT4, but it is quicker than a Buick GSX, which would have been a rival of the time, Subaru BRZ, Mazda Speed 3. Yeah, pretty a decent time from the Coronet overall. Next up, we find the Chevrolet Nova in 299th place with 129.338. It's quicker than a Civic, an Alpine Le Mans, and a Q7 V12 diesel. But I guess the most important thing there is it beats a Plymouth GTX and a Dodge Challenger, because those are the closest car. It's also slightly slower than a Dodge Coronet. Next up, we find the main contingent of cars today. In 316th place, we find the Chevrolet Camaro Z28 with a 130.095, slightly slower than a Nova Supersport. In 318th place, we find the Ford Mustang Boss 302 with a 130.103, which is slightly slower than a Ford Fiesta ST, which again, like the Neon, is ironic. In 323rd place, we find the Pontiac GTO Judge with a 130.266, slightly quicker than an Oldsmobile 442, which I believe those two may or may not share platforms. They look very similar, and it is slightly slower than a Australian Ford Falcon Phase 3. Yeah, interesting bunch of times. It's weird where these cars end up. And finally today, unsurprisingly, the slowest car today was the Ford Falcon GT, going into 366th place with 133.506, goes between a very rare Maserati and a Dodge Shelby Omni. It's quicker than a Capri though, which is interesting. So in the battle of European muscle cars versus Australian muscle cars, I guess we have to conclude the Australians win that one, although it's unsurprising. So, thank you all very much for watching this edition of Forza Top Gear Laps. Join us for the next main episode, which of course will take a look at the modern equivalents of these cars as we take a look at some more modern muscle cars. Join us for the Rivals episode, that will be occurring at some point. That will feature two muscle cars battling that you wouldn't necessarily expect to come into contact with each other. And one final thing to mention before we go, by the time this video comes out, which should be the 22nd of October, that is actually this channel's 5-year anniversary of me doing commentary, so I've had to listen to my own voice back for 5 years, and it has not been fun. But thank you all very much for 5 years. I guess I was nowhere near expecting this to last as long as this, and it has done. And it's been slightly more successful than I thought it'd be as well, so that's a bonus. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.